Hey guys, my name is Haley, and today I'm here to film the majority of what I read in November. So my November wrap-up minus Tome Topple, which took place at the very end of the month. So let's get started. So I read 7 things before Tome Topple started, although one of them I technically read at the very beginning of Tome Topple, but when you see what it is, you'll see why. But yeah. The first thing I finished was The Trouble with Paris by Mark Sayers. This is a Christian nonfiction book that covers the topic of hyperreality, which is a reality that is unattainable. So like a reality that we see in social media like Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of thing, that everybody's trying to reach, but you can never quite reach it because it's not real. Like, it's not something that can be attained, like the perfect life that everybody aspires to have. And it's very, very much perpetuated by social media nowadays. And I thought it was really interesting. I found it very, very, like, true to real life. And there was so much in here that I was like, yep, I've definitely thought that, because that's just the culture that we've grown up in, with social media being so prevalent. And I annotated this one a lot, like I do with all of my Christian nonfiction, or most of my nonfiction in general. And I thought this just had a lot to say about society today and how it works and how we think as people that have grown up in this technological generation. So I would highly recommend it. It does have Christian perspective on things, but even if you're not a Christian, I feel like this is a very interesting topic for just if you're interested in social media and how it affects our generation. Next, I read Sweet Tooth Volume 2 in Captivity. I really enjoyed this. It had a lot of backstory on one of the main characters from the first volume, and we got to see more of the animal hybrid kids, which I thought was really interesting. The art style is just beautiful and stunning, and I think there was one in here that was my favorite, where he was being sort of hypnotized by a doctor, and the way that it was portrayed in the visuals was so interesting to me. Yeah, I just found the artwork in this was stunning, and I can't wait to continue with this series whenever I get my hands on the other volumes. Next up, I read The Silver Eyes, which is a novel based on the game franchise Five Nights at Freddy's. I really like the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, and there's a YouTube gamer who I watch regularly. His YouTube name is Harshly Critical. His name is John, and I love his gameplay of it. I highly suggest John's channel if you don't like gamers that are super overreact to horror games, and most of what he plays is horror games. He plays a lot of indie horror too, or free games you can find on Steam. So side note, if you're interested in YouTube gamers, but I highly recommend his channel. I'll link it down below. But this was essentially a book that takes place after, I want to say, the 3rd Five Nights at Freddy's, maybe the 4th. I think it takes place before Sister Location, so if you are familiar with the game, I think you should watch the first 4, then read this, then watch Sister Location. Not that it really spoils anything, but it doesn't touch on Sister Location. But I don't know if people who aren't a fan of the franchise would like this, but as someone who really likes the idea of sentient, robotic animals, and who grew up going to Chuck E. Cheese all the time, which is essentially what this is kind of based off of, I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. It's not the best writing. The dialogue is a little sketchy, but the action scenes were written much better. So I would recommend it if you're interested in Five Nights at Freddy's, basically. I read Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I had really high expectations for this because I really like this Savage Song, her other book. And I know this is a lot of people's favorite of Victoria Schwab's books. I did really like it. I loved the concept of EOs, or extraordinary people. And I really liked that the 2 friends ended up as enemies later on. But Essentially, the two main characters got on my nerves for like different reasons. Not even different reasons, for kind of the same reason, that they both felt that they were so right and there was nothing that would detract them from that thought, that they were right and nobody could tell them otherwise. I think Eli annoyed me more than Victor did, but I liked Victor for the majority of it, and then he would do something stupid and I'm like, oh, why? Why did you do that? Eli, I don't think I ever really loved Eli that much, so maybe that could be why, but I loved Mitch. He was probably my favorite character. I love Dominic, who's a character that's introduced somewhere towards the end, I think. His ability as an EO was so cool, and I would love to see more on him, and I really liked Sydney as well, so I would recommend this if you like Victoria Schwab's writing, if you like super villains, or like superheroes even, but mostly super villains in this case. But yes, I would recommend. I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I went to Half Price Books. This is not a book haul, I don't know why I'm talking about it, but I went to Half Price Books and exchanged a bunch of books that I just wasn't interested in anymore, or that I didn't really like that I read last month, and traded them all in for a brand new hardcover of The Sun Is Also a Star, which I've been dying to read, which doesn't happen very often with contemporaries. And I have not read her previous book, Everything Everything, but I was so interested in this because it's very diverse in the characters, and it takes place in New York City, and it also has one of my favorite tropes, which is books that take place over a short period of time, like a couple hours or a day. In this case, I believe it takes place over like 12 hours. So I was really excited to read this, and I had a friend that was reading it, and I was just like, I need to buy it right now. So I did. I tabbed a bunch of it for quotes or just like concepts that I found very interesting. Also, this cover is stunning, but I feel like this just had such a unique like look on immigration and deportation and illegal immigrants and all that kind of thing, because the girl, Natasha, was one of my favorite protagonists that I've read from in a really long time, especially in a contemporary, because I like that she didn't really believe in the love at first sight thing, and the other guy was all for it, and she's like, that doesn't happen, like I'm not even sure I believe in love, let alone love at first sight. And I think that was an interesting take on this concept of two people meet in one day and fall in love. But it didn't feel insta-lovey because she was so like standoffish about it for a while. So I really liked the way the insta-love was handled in this. I just felt like Natasha's reaction to her family being deported was super interesting because it's very relevant in what's going on in the world right now with the election, and that's all I'm gonna say on that. But I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It's by far one of my favorite contemporaries I've read in a really long time, and I really enjoyed it. I read If You Feel Too Much by Jamie Twerkowski. I'm realizing I've talked about 2 of these books in my last video. Anyways, this is a nonfiction on the founder of the organization To Write Love on Her Arms, which is an organization that handles like suicide and depression and that kind of thing, and it's sort of like an organization of hope for people that are struggling with depression, anxiety, and that kind of thing. And this book itself is a bind up of Jamie's, I think it's his blog, I believe, and just his thoughts. And the way that he writes is just so beautiful. Like, it's almost a stream of consciousness thing, but at the same time it's very poetic in the way that he thinks, and it's just like he literally writes from his heart, and you can tell that his feelings just bleed through the pages at you while you're reading it, and I loved it so much. Also, it was nice, I opened this book, and in the very first page, which if you know me or have been around for a little while, the very first page is a note from John Foreman, who is the lead singer of Switchfoot, who I went to their concert twice a couple months ago, and I'm going again in February. So it's one of my favorite bands, and it was very nice because I didn't comprehend that Jamie and John were friends, so to see him in here in both like a forward and the acknowledgments was really cool. I think it's the kind of book that anybody could get something out of it, no matter who you are or if you read nonfiction or not, or you know anything about Troy Love in Her Arms. I think this gives a sort of decent overall idea of what they're trying to do with that organization. And I would love to see one of Jamie's speeches that he gives. Like, he'll travel around the country and give speeches on Try Love in Her Arms and like what he thinks of the world and how he battles with his own depression and stuff. And I would just love to hear him talk. Lastly, there's a book that I technically read during Tome Topple, but I only read it during Tome Topple because I went and saw the movie, was obsessed with it, bought the book, read the book in like a day and a half, and then went and saw the movie again. And that is The Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them screenplay by J.K. Rowling. This movie was amazing. I loved it. I love being back in the wizarding world, and I love that we're in the wizarding world not only in the US but also with adults, so we get to see more of like how magic works for not children like Harry was in the Harry Potter series. And it was so weird for me to see a movie set in the wizarding world that I didn't know what was gonna happen, because that hasn't happened since like Prisoner of Azkaban came out and I read all of the books that were out at the time. So it was so strange, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm really enjoying seeing like fan theories of what's going to happen in the rest of the Fantastic Beasts movies, because there's going to be 5 of them. And this screenplay, which I also tabbed, I tabbed like characters or like super important plot points, and I tabbed all of the magical beasts that are in here as well. So basically I'm just gearing up for new Wizarding World things, and I'm so excited about it, and I couldn't be happier with how good the movie was, and I kind of want to see it again, but I've already seen it twice in theaters and I probably shouldn't. But yeah, I loved it so much. It is essentially the movie just in script format, but I felt like the script was much more helpful in catching character names. Like, some of the character names went by so fast, like they said it once or twice, and then I was like, wait, what is your name? Like, slow down, because the movie is like, I felt it was very fast-paced most of the time, and there were some names that I picked up on just because they said it a million times. But yeah, as far as comprehending who the people are, like the new characters, and who the beasts were and what beasts they were and how they work and what exactly they do, this was very helpful, and I very much appreciate that she released it in book format. So yeah, those are all of the books I read in the most of November. There are a couple more that I'm going to be having in my Tome Topple Wrap Up, but these are the ones I read outside of that readathon. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.